As far back as ancient Greek and Egyptian societies, in the times when myths and legends were born, artists have created impossibly high ideals for the body beautiful. And as our culture has changed over time, so too did the physical idea that humans held up as perfection. Technology, the digital age, and social media may have accelerated the pace of change, but it hasn't changed the substance of the question. What is the beauty ideal? The ancient Greeks invented the notion of the ideal body, using the human form as an object of sensory delight and as an expression of the intelligent mind. They had a view that perfection didn't exist in nature. Perfection was what art gave to nature. The ancient Greeks revered naked, athletic, well-defined perfection, but knew this was unlikely to exist in the real world. So their artists merged what they considered the ideal features from different bodies, often male and female, into one form to create the perfect specimen. The idea of a sculpted body was design. It didn't take inspiration from one model, but from several models. The arm of one, the head of another. The biggest compliment you could pay a young man of the time was to say he resembled a bronze god, a statue or sculpture. If there's one famous piece of ancient art which demonstrates this above all others, it must be the discus thrower, Discobolus, by Myron. Myron, who was active as far back in antiquity as 450 BC, is demonstrating that sculptors can be philosophers too, and he employs more symmetrical detail in his figures than any other sculptor of the time. Like Da Vinci, as evidenced in his Vitruvian Man, created in 1490, Myron was an obsessive measurer. He used mathematics in order to construct and calculate his idea of the ideal. But even more than that, he also used the balancing of opposites, which had been the central theme of natural philosophy of the 6th century BC, in determining the nature of the world and man's place in it. The head is turned as one arm extends behind, holding the discus, whilst the other arm hangs free to counterbalance. One leg is weight-bearing, the other leg is weight-free. One set of toes arch up, and the other set of toes curl under. When you look at the construction of the figure's form together, you see a construction of balance, harmony, and rhythm.
So I think there was always this in the ancient classic times with, the super masculine.
The fascination with, the male body and the human form, always kind of centers around and points back to athleticism. So, whether it be the Greek gods or whether it be, the warriors and the people who were really, in ancient times were really revered and worshipped as heroes, to the heroes of today, which are the athletes and the NBA players and the football players and the soccer players. And, these are tremendously talented, powerful machines. And I think the idea of that type of masculinity is always something that, represents, the male form.
1,000 years after the body beautiful of the ancient Greek artists, the Renaissance period from the 1400s to the 1600s saw the start of a shift from the chiseled physiques of Michelangelo's David to more pale-skinned, voluptuous, full-figured female shapes. It was followed by the Baroque period, when Rubens and Rembrandt painted voluptuous female figures. Even today, the description Rubenesque is given to women who are larger than the average size. A few decades later came the 1920s flapper era of boyish looks and hidden curves, before the curvy feminine figure returned mid-century as the popular perfect body that women aspired to and men admired. In this era of Hollywood golden girls and voluptuous busty hourglass figures, style icons included Marilyn Monroe, Grace Kelly, and Elizabeth Taylor, who became stars and who continue to influence fashion today. The 1960s saw an obsession with the Twiggy look, a thin, almost androgynous body type that for most was unattainable, and a body type that made somewhat of a comeback on the catwalks of the world during the late 1990s, when the heroin chic, emaciated look was popular among waif-like models such as Kate Moss. But it was the 1980s and 90s, the decade of the supermodel, that had many people, and not just women, questioning their body shape. It was the tall, slender female silhouettes of Linda, Naomi, Christy strutting on the catwalks and peering off the pages of magazines, as well as the buffed Adonis-like males of Marcus Schenkenberg and Tyson Beckford, who were depicted in the photo spreads and billboards of Bruce Weber, who brought a new focus on the physical ideal.
I started in the late 80s, and it was the very beginning of the supermodel era. I remember Christy Turlington's first ever British Vogue cover, July 1986, by Patrick Marshall. I remember all these things, and you saw these girls, and Linda Evangelista being shot by Peter Lindbergh. They were just kind of reaching new heights, and they were becoming celebrities in their own right, whereas before the models had been nameless. And it was just such a special time. It was very creative, it was very collaborative, it was very exciting. It was pre-social media, obviously, so the magazines had such strength and they had such power because this is the only place that you could find these girls and see these amazing pictures.
It was a liberation of sorts, so you were able to choose what suited you best. And in the middle of all of this, these creatures appeared. They kind of, appeared en masse. It's very strange because it's very hard to kind of pinpoint it, but all of a sudden they were just there and they were different. There was something, there was the Susie Parkers and Dovimas of the 50s and Lauren Hutton in the 70s and Twiggy and Jean Shrimpton and Verushka in the 60s, but there was nothing quite like this.
For the first time in history, these models were bigger stars and celebrities than the best screen icons Hollywood could offer us.
They're all the big stars of the world today, and that is what they do with the clothes, the way they move and everything. But people today want to know about those girls like people wanted to know about movie stars.
Well, they've replaced movie stars in a way, have they not?
In a way they do, because movie stars, they talk too much. They're like me, they talk too much. Huh?
Today, just as in ancient times, there's a huge and seemingly insatiable interest in beauty, body culture. So what is the modern ideal? When does aspiration become exasperation? Are there destructive side effects for vulnerable young people? And now, new forces such as social media, diversity, gender fluidity, body shape, representation, and inclusion are shaping the culture's current idea of the ideal. Supermodel. Upon hearing this word, many people conjure up the single names of Linda, Naomi, or Christy, or maybe even a Cindy may come to mind.
The dawning of this era of supermodels was, of course, the most famous Naomi, Cindy, Christy, Linda.
Millennials later to the dance might imagine more current memes of what a supermodel is, whether this be the heroin chic era stars like Kate Moss in her Calvin Klein Obsession ads, or today's reigning biggest earner, reality TV, social media star, Kendall Jenner.
A supermodel is someone, in my experience, who just takes it one step further, really understands their own power, their own strength, their own image. All those girls that I work with are super clever, bright, well-read, smart, savvy business people, very aware of their position, of their influence before social media and Instagram, etc., etc. I think they just raised the game, and I think they became the superstars of the fashion magazines and the advertising campaigns. It was a wonderful period in the 80s and the 90s where this fusion of music and art and fashion all sort of came melded together. And I think the supermodels were the ones that were able to deal with the pressure of traveling and being in demand and not lose themselves, but turn up every day and always give 100% and just really professional. They were super professional in every aspect of their life and the way they presented themselves in front of the camera and also behind. They were super.
Whilst most people today have an idea on what a supermodel is, very few have any idea of the history of the term. Whilst many say the supermodel was born in the 1990s, the idea actually dates back more than a century. The idea of modelling dates back over 150 years to France, where the first recorded use of a model happened in Paris in 1853. Prominent Parisian designer Charles Frederick Worth first had the bold idea to show his clothes on a living person, as opposed to the wooden mannequins that were popular at the time. What we take for granted today was revolutionary back then. Worth not only changed the entire fashion industry, but the consumer-to-designer relationship as well. His wife, Marie Vernet Worth, has been described by historians as the world's first model. Thanks to the work of Worth and his lovingly compliant wife, house models became standard in the world of Parisian fashion. This idea soon spread globally, and by the early 1900s, American department stores were hiring models to showcase the latest in trends and designs. Revolution followed revolution, and as the photographic industry saw improvements in technology and increases in public interest, a magazine industry was born, and models were soon being hired for photographic shoots. 1856 had seen the publication of a 200-page book featuring photographs of the Countess of Castiglione in official court garb, but the founding of Harper's Bazaar in 1867 and Vogue in 1892 were monumental in the establishment of a genuine fashion industry. Fashion and modelling had now become synonymous terms. How then did the idea of superior or supermodel come about? It was only in the 1940s when photographers began showcasing preferences for certain models over others, and writers began to describe girls as superior models or supermodels. There is plenty of debate around who is considered the first supermodel. Anita Colby was referred to as a supermodel super movie saleswoman in a 1949 issue of Cosmopolitan. Susan Chu was also described as supermodel in Chinatown News in 1959. But the most widely agreed upon consensus names model Lisa Fonsa-Greaves as being the world's first supermodel. Lisa Fonsa-Greaves was born in Sweden in 1911. With a career dating from the 1930s to the 1960s that saw her appear in most major fashion magazines. Fonsegrives was loved by both the public and by the most high-profile photographers of the time, which allowed her to charge twice the going rate for a model. Fonsegrives' preternaturally elegant and patrician air and skill with movement and understanding of her body made her a natural in front of the camera, and soon leading image makers from Horst P. Horst to Man Ray to Richard Avedon were lining up to shoot her. She was well established by the time she met renowned photographer Irving Penn on set in 1947, thus beginning an extremely important collaboration in the world of fashion and in her personal life, as the pair would eventually marry. Penn photographed his wife and muse countless times during their marriage, several of his images going on to become extremely iconic and highly rated testaments to what is considered by many as the first golden age in fashion and photography. The 1960s saw the establishment of numerous modelling agencies. Not only did this formalise the career of the model, but it created an ease of innovation in the industry, thanks also to cultural shifts during the era. Individualism was on the rise, paving the way for such worldwide icons as Jean Shrimpton, Verushka, and Peggy Moffat. By being themselves, with their respective quirks, body types, and idiosyncrasies, these models and others redefined what a model could be, earning extremely high amounts whilst doing so. One of the most iconic and most fondly remembered models of the 60s was Dame Leslie Lawson, better known as Twiggy.
If you Google Twiggy, this is the first picture that comes up, and every variation of that picture.
And it's also amazing because wherever I go in the world, that picture is somewhere on a t-shirt, on a handbag. It shouldn't be, but it is. And it is probably the most famous picture of me from that period.
With her short, slender frame and androgynous look, Twiggy defined the swinging 60s for many people, with a career that expanded into film, television, and fashion design.
You know, because just pre-me, if you look at the girls before me, a year or so before, you know, it was Shrimpton and all those gorgeous creatures.
So who were your heroes or heroines?
Well, Shrimpton was all over my wall. I thought she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And Verushka, Jane Birkin, Moira Swan.
Oh, people were saying last year that I look like Jean Shrimpton, and now they're saying that I look like Twiggy.
Do you think you look like Twiggy?
Oh, a little bit, yes, but not all the way.
I think it's very nice. I think it gives the little thin girl a go. I mean, before it was always the vulturous girls, wasn't it? Well, now my girl has always been called Twiggy at school and legs 11 and all sort of funny things, you know. Well, now I think it's given her confidence.
As time went on, and cultural groups and movements started to define history, the path from model to supermodel started to move beyond mere popularity. Suddenly, models needed to be needle movers, able to outshine the clothes they wore. They needed to have the it factor. Not just recognizable, but somehow they needed to be able to embody an entire generation at a glance. So what was it that separated a supermodel from a model? And how can one face define a generation? These were no longer philosophical questions, but a genuine business hurdle, one that marketers struggled with, especially during the 1960s.
Training for the day when heads will turn to look at them at an academy in Fulham, London, are some of Britain's models of the future. For this is one of the country's most up-to-date training schools for models and mannequins.
The 60s were also instrumental in changing the way society saw people of colour. To a large extent, Caucasian models were the norm, and there was little diversity to be seen in the industry. But during this era of revolution and love, women of color began to get the recognition they deserved. Born Peggy Ann Freeman in Detroit, Danielle Luna was the world's first African-American supermodel, appearing in a number of films by Andy Warhol and also Fellini's Satyricon.
Oh, c'était beau ça. Ça c'est beau.
Dark beauty is a wonderland for those who do not have to live within it, she once said.
Yeah, I guess, she could actually recognize that being exotic wasn't enough, and she still was a girl that was a girl of color, and that it could be very, unique to those, because she had a lot of, when I met her, because I was never a fan of Danielle Luna. I didn't get it at all, but I was also young, and I was also like, she had a lot of little gay guys around her, and they just thought she was she was everything, and they fluttered around her like little, like, I don't know, fruit flies. I didn't see what they saw, but I understand what that statement could mean. Those who find you so much like that in an exotic way and find you so beautiful, but just to live that person is not so easy.
Danielle's father was an abusive alcoholic. After her mother shot him to death, the pain of this family catastrophe must have mixed uneasily with being an object of rarefication. Boyfriends included actors Terence Stamp, Klaus Kinski, as well as genius junkies Miles Davis and Brian Jones from the Rolling Stones. Danielle tellingly described her experience with LSD as a reminder to her that she was capable of loving and being loved. She was swiftly, however, introduced to more damaging drugs and stellar company containing those with psychological problems of their own. Her career as a human artwork flourished for a while. In 1966, she became the first black woman on the cover of British Vogue, photographed by David Bailey. But she died tragically in 1979 from a heroin overdose. Luna paved the way for such well-known names as Naomi Sims, who was the first lady of color to grace the cover of Ladies' Home Journal, as well as Life magazine. And in the 70s, Beverly Johnson became the first black model on the cover of American Vogue, and later French Elle. But it was in 1973 that a landmark event occurred that would change the balance of fashion forever, known as the Battle for Versailles. On a late November night during 1973, 5 American fashion designers, Oscar de la Renta, Bill Blass, Anne Klein, Halston, and Stephen Burrows, gathered at a palace of Versailles to show against the 5 French designers considered the greatest in the world: Yves Saint Laurent, Hubert de Givenchy, Pierre Cardin, Emmanuel Ungaro, and Mark Bowen of Christian Dior. The star-studded room included everyone from Andy Warhol to Josephine Baker, and the Princess Grace of Monaco. While the French came with their elaborate sets, the Americans arrived with Liza Minnelli and 36 models in tow.
Oh my God, who doesn't want to be in show business and work with Liza Minnelli as a chorus girl? I mean, you gotta hoof it in the back, but you're still there, you know? Some of the girls had never been off 7th Avenue. They'd never been to Paris. And it was like all the girls that you would never see in your life were the saviors of American fashion.
For the 5 American designers to be invited to show on the stage alongside the French was really notable for Americans. It was also notable because the Americans brought 36 models with them, and 10 of them were African American.
All I can say is that what Versailles did was truly put the American standard on the map. The French were blown away, but it wasn't the designers they were blown away by. Had nothing to do with us. We just clothed them, you know what I mean? It was the girls sitting in this room.
At Versailles, we had these unbelievably extraordinary, beautiful girls walking to music. And they really make the presentation be the magic that it was.
That was the greatest moment I've had in my career, was actually Versailles. It was a wonderful experience, and we won.
It was a classic underdog story, and also woke the fashion world to the incredible beauty, grace, and life force of the black models.
One thing I want to say that I know is personal, but I know I'm representing each and every one of the girls, is that truly the fashion model should never die, because she's such an intricate part of fashion. We all want to say thank you very much, because I know in my heart that we all know that without us, it wouldn't have been very much, but we really were very proud to be part of it. We're very proud. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much.
The 70s ushered in an era of contract modeling. Margot Hemingway landed $1 million perfume contract for Fabergé.
Your eyes really turn me on, baby. Where did you get those luscious lips, babe?
And Cheryl Tiegs reportedly signed a $1.5 million deal with CoverGirl, the largest of its time.
Putting on makeup, feeling beautiful is so important to how you feel emotionally. If I wake up in the morning...
We're talking to a famous model about the makeup she uses.
CoverGirl, of course.
She was also the first woman on the cover of Sports Illustrated magazine, a mere milestone for today's supermodels.
When I came to the United States, everybody thought I was a royalty. They said, she's a princess and all that. And I remember meeting Diana Vreeland on my second day, and she was like, now that is a neck. And I was like, she's crazy.
Iman was discovered in 1979 by Peter Beard, who spotted the Somalian stunner on the streets in Nairobi, Kenya. She moved to the USA, and her first job was with American Vogue.
This is my first Vogue shoot. So here I am wearing Halston. Peter took me to see Halston literally the 4th day that I arrived in New York. So I walked into Halston's studio, and he was so grand with all these mirrors around him, a hand in his pocket, the ever-present cigarette in his hand. And he said to me, "Darling, can you walk?" And I said to him, "How the hell do you think I got here?" I had no idea what he was talking about. And he actually had Pat Cleveland come and help me to show me how to walk. I was mesmerized by Pat because, as you know, she twirls and all that. And I was like, nobody is going to be expecting me to do this. There's no way I can do that. And needless to say, I've never copied her because I don't do the twirling. I decided that I will come up with my own walk, making myself very grand and, walk slowly and that. But all that came out of fear.
Iman is a bestie of mine. I've known her since she first came to this country in America. So, I was when she calls me her because I And I embraced her at a moment that was a little bit difficult for her. And she calls me her Statue of Liberty. When she wrote her book, that's what she refers to me as, her Statue of Liberty. First person that was really kind to her and gave her a welcoming hand.
I met Iman through Beth Ann, and over the years, you know, she's always been like a big sister. And then, you know, having a chance to work with her late great husband, that was amazing. He used to crack me up. We used to just joke and just, you know, the little bit that I get to be in her life is kind of cool, because she is a legend, you know, and always will be. And, you know, I feel like the industry doesn't give her as much props as she deserves, you know, which she's the holy grail, you know. Her, Beth Ann are really, truly the holy grail, and they're just so powerful. And it's, you know, I remember seeing her as a kid, like in the 70s in magazines, like, wow, who is this amazing woman? Like, you know, I want a wife like that, you know? So it's very powerful to see these women.
She quickly rose to supermodel status and became a favorite of many designers and photographers. Yves Saint Laurent once described her as his dream woman.
Yves Saint Laurent asked me to be his muse one season. It was a couture season. My God, this is an opportunity to work with a master. And I immediately said yes to it without understanding what it entailed. I get there and they give me a white lab coat, silky pantyhose with a seam at the back, a black stiletto, underwear off, bra off, put the coat on and wait. And waited. And then all of a sudden I was ushered into his studio. And I was standing 12 hours a day. It was the most difficult job I've ever done. But what I've experienced was something I've never experienced in the fashion industry, which was fabrics from bolts of fabric being created around my body and cut on my body to create this couture collection. When he finished the collection, he called it the African Queen. It was just brilliant.
She would later marry with David Bowie, become a successful entrepreneur and philanthropist/activist.
There are people who just come to the earth that's just meant to do. It's the destiny. It's their actual destiny. They come here to actually be successful, and they will be because of who they are. It's like having all of the chromosomes in your system that all comes together to makes it all work. You know, no matter what journey they go through, no matter if they go peak like this, they come up because they're meant to. And they save themselves from themselves because they're real deal. And she has a mind. If she works on something, and look, it just comes together. I'm sure other people do the same thing. Nothing comes together. But in her case, it does. It did. She's a unique character. A beauty at the beach. She's sophisticated in that way. But she's strong, she's tough, and she knows what she wants, and she goes after things.
Secret of my success is patience, which is the most difficult, right? Patience. Be patient, stay focused, keep your eye on the prize, and your time will come.
It was a Peter Lindbergh photograph that changed fashion. The German photographer sparked a phenomenon with a shot in American Vogue in August 1988 of a group of rising models in white shirts on the beach. Then in January 1990 came his British Vogue cover, featuring a black and white tableau of the original single moniker models, Linda, Naomi, Cindy, Tatiana, and Christy.
That was January 92 for British Vogue. And this is the birth certificate of the supermodels.
Birth certificate of the supermodels.
That there's such a group right now. There's like a cluster of us that people seem to know. But I think that, and we talked about this before a little bit, that models are glamorous right now when no one else. A lot of people sort of shun glamour for a while, and models still are glamorous because that's what we do, and that's what people. It's because sometimes people don't have that in their life, so they want to look at it and they want to see it.
So it was the late 80s, and all of a sudden we noticed in the industry something different was happening. The really good models that were working all the time were selling out on magazines and product and things, and suddenly they were being known by just one name, Cindy and Linda. And so it became the era of the supermodels, just going from the late 80s into the 90s. And for me at the time, I was running Elite London and Paris as the head booker. So it was a brilliant time to be in the industry.
Every campaign, every fashion show, they were the muses for almost every photographer. And if you look back on the careers of, for example, Linda Evangelista, Christy Turlington, or Naomi, they were all used in virtually every designer campaign, every fashion show they opened or closed it, one of them did.
It was very much about collaboration. You know, it did become like the same 9 or 10 girls that were in all the best fashion shows. They were in, you know, all the Vogues across the world. They were being shot by the same 8 or 10 photographers. But because of that, they built amazing relationships. It was very much about, you know, collaborating creatively. And, you know, you knew that Peter Lindbergh and Linda Evangelista together was just going to be an amazing hit team. You knew that was going to be fantastic. And these girls were extraordinary models. They weren't just the most beautiful. They were also incredibly good at what they did. And I think that made a huge difference. That it, you know, you couldn't have an amazing shoot. You could have the best photographer, the best clothes, the best location. But if the girl wasn't right or the boy wasn't right, you wouldn't get the vision that you'd conceived. So it was, I think it was just really when the models became as powerful as anybody else on the team. They were such a necessary component for success.
By the 80s and 90s, the concept of the supermodel was reaching its peak. Naomi Campbell, Linda Evangelista, and Christy Turlington were called the Trinity. Stephanie Seymour, Claudia Schiffer, and Cindy Crawford also rose in heights. The Trinity became the Big Six, genuine rock stars in their own right. George Michael's Freedom 90 has had a lasting cultural impact. The catchy song released 30 years ago in 1990 addressed his struggles with identity, George's troubled sexuality, artistic growth and stardom in a meaningful way.
I suppose obviously as a 22-year-old, 23-year-old, obviously I'm more experienced sexually than I was as an 18-year-old, so maybe it's time for that to start reflecting in the music. Everyone is right now expecting me to move into the kind of artists that they've been comparing me to for the last couple of years, i.e. another Elton. But I do have the advantage of youth.
At the time he was struggling with the media scrutiny on him, and he also is inherently quite a shy person, so that side of the industry he really struggled with. And at the time he just felt that he just didn't want to do another music video, and he was moving away from Wham and into the George Michael solo career at the time.
Becky Davies was a booker at Elite Paris in the 90s who happened to manage the Big Six. She was also dating George Michael's manager. Casting the models for Freedom 90 was her suggestion.
He really wanted to again have another phase of his life. Having written Freedom, which we'd all heard, he felt that there was a real correlation between fashion and music. The cover of Vogue had come out with Peter Lindbergh using the 5 supermodels, and he literally turned around to me and said, "Becky, I want to use the 5 supermodels in the video." And I'm, what? We'd had a few wines by then. And I also then went on to explain that it was Paris Fashion Week and getting those would be like finding hen's teeth. And I said, you know, it's just going to be impossible. So I said, what a brilliant idea. David and I both thought it was an extraordinary idea. I managed to sort of procure, I think Naomi was the first. So we got Naomi. And I have this distinct memory of negotiating up and above for $10,000 US per girl, flights on Concorde to bring them in if they were in, you know, New York, just to try and get them there. We had a small window.
I remember when George came up to me in LA was in a nightclub, and he was like, well, I heard you're the leader, and I want you to do this video. I want all of you from the cover in a video.
Naomi was with me in London, so I went, Naomi's come on, we've got to do this, and she was like, yeah, and then David Fincher stepped in. So it was a bit like it gathered strength and momentum. And once that happened, then everyone just went, I'm going to do this. And it was finally with Cindy, and she went, I want to do this. This is going to be an iconic moment in the music and fashion industry, and I want to do it. And at that point, we were in the play.
Though models being in a music video wasn't a new phenomenon, in the past women had usually been cast in a girlfriend role. Here, instead of being appendages, the models were the focus of the video. They, along with the lesser-known male models John Pearson and now fashion photographer Mario Sorrenti, were the ones lip-syncing lyrics.
I think the fact that they added somebody like John Pearson in there who still looks unbelievable.
I mean, he's Montgomery Clift handsome, an excellent model. He's a wonderful human being.
My agent called and said, oh, look, there's this Christy and Cindy and the girls are doing this great new video. You've got to do it. It's George Michael. He's really, it's a great song. They want you to do it. I said, can we fit it in? And he said, yeah, we can. I really think you should do it. David Fincher is the director. He's going to be a massive director. I said, okay, let's go. Let's do it.
I remember when they were going to shoot the George Michael Freedom video, and I was working at the time with Linda Evangelista, and she was trying to learn the words to the video.
When I saw George Michael's Freedom video, I was, I got goosebumps.
I mean, the George Michael's video was everything to me. I think the reason why I'm here today is because of that video.
So you had all the top girls. You had Christy, you had Linda, you had Naomi, you had Cindy, and then you had someone like John Pearson. So you certainly had to, or you certainly had to cast someone that was going to be able to match up to those girls.
That was a remarkable time, and it was remarkable to watch Linda being shot, which was just incredible. And I remember Christy being next to me, we were watching it. We knew that we were participating in something that would have relevance, and we were excited about it. But we really didn't understand, or at least I didn't understand that, for 30 years on, it became this, especially in America, this sort of, iconic video.
I mean, everyone knew that video.
Right, they became part of popular culture. I mean, again, they were suddenly everywhere. They were at the Oscars, they were on late night talk shows, they were dating rock stars, they were endorsing this and that they were also on the runways and in editorial spreads. And up until that point, usually the runway girls were very different than the editorial magazine girls. They crossed both worlds.
The impact that music videos working with models was starting to have globally. And of course, it was the time of MTV, and MTV ruled the world. And these collaborations, looking back, are hilarious and hysterical. But in the moment, they were like the coolest new thing, and quite powerful for the musical artist, and like next level for the models.
I still today reference that video. People reference that video in all the work that we do.
The first time I saw the video of Freedom 90, I was on a shoot in a hotel in Miami Beach. And we were in a bar in this hotel. The photographer was shooting me from behind the bar, and MTV was on, and it suddenly came on. And I was like, oh, I think I did this. And everyone around me just went bonkers. I mean, really bonkers. I was like, what? Is it that good? I didn't really know. And that was it.
Here they were singing, the top song of 1990. These amazing creatures channeling a George Michael song. And I mean, can you get that out of your head? Yeah, it's like, give me a break. How amazing was that point?
Later that year, Gianni Versace used Freedom 90 to close his fall 1991 show, a now iconic moment in fashion. Versace's fall 1991 show ended with 4 of the models from the video, Campbell, Evangelista, Crawford and Turlington, walking down the runway hand in hand as they once more mouthed the words to Michael's song.
When Gianni Versace did his show and all the girls came out in their beautiful little dresses to Freedom, that was again another fashion meets music iconic moment. You know, back in those days, there wasn't so much social media and things like that. This was huge. It just blew up and everybody was talking about it. It was the combination of the music industry meets the fashion industry.
Gianni Versace solidified the importance and status of supermodels by bringing these 4 together. A moment that took place thanks in part to Michael and his music.
The press bothers me.
Press?
Yeah, the tabloids, like the gossip. And people believe it, you know, often it's never true and, you know, that kind of stuff.
The 80s were over and the 90s, to me, represented something different, something more natural, something less flashy.
Later in the 90s, and with the arrival of Kate Moss and the more growing popularity of grunge, heroin chic outpaced the more refined virtues of the Big Six.
Or maybe if I'm not finishing with anything.
In the world of supermodels, the big news this season is the rather small Kate Moss. Her little girl prepubescent image is a big change from the taller, curvier models who dominated the catwalks over the past few years. What do you think about doing this? They're all taller than you, for one thing.
I get heels. I get heels and they get flats. Thank you.
When Kate Moss shot to stellar stardom, it was widely agreed that fashion hadn't produced anything quite like her since the days of Twiggy, and nor was it ever likely to again, at least not for another 20 or so years. But now the fashion business has once again donned its suit of political incorrectness. This time it's hungry for waif newcomer Jodie Kidd, and it seems there's just not enough to go round. Influenced by a constant bombardment of media images, everyday girls are literally dying to be thin.
She's got that something, that look of natural beauty or something that many, motion models sort of lack, but she's just a lot different from we other models.
It never occurred to me that anyone would scream about anorexia. I mean, I never thought about it.
When people do talk about supermodels, and they always cite you as Kate Moss is always cited as the supermodel that's maybe a bad influence on young people. But you're thin. Have you always been thin, or do you work hard to be your shape?
I've always been thin, but all the girls are thin. Right. Most of the girls. I mean, a lot of the girls. Everyone's different shapes. Some people are smaller than me, and some people are bigger.
You've never dieted, have you? I mean, she eats perfectly normal.
You just eat normal food. You don't have to bother. It's really annoying, isn't it?
Yeah, high metabolism.
So you just
nervous energy.
I just wonder though, maybe it would be a good thing perhaps because so many young girls who aren't lucky enough to have a figure like yours do diet and do starve themselves.
But they're going to diet anyway. People are going to diet whatever the fashion trends are, I think, anyway.
Although people do say that because the fashion trend now at the moment is to be very, very slender. Do you feel any sort of responsibility to that, or do you just think that
No, because it's not my responsibility. I mean, people book me for a job. I'm not going to say no, girls are going to diet because of it.
Then in the early 2000s, we had the Brazilian invasion, with the arrival of Gisele Bündchen, Adriana Lima, and Alessandra Ambrosio, hitting American soil.
The hottest girls right now are the Brazilians.
One girl after another shows up and she's absolutely beautiful, walks like a dream.
I love the Brazilian girls, they're so much fun. They've got no bad attitudes and they love to dance.
They just love the Brazilian girls because they move her hips.
Every time I get to the show, there's 2 or 3 more Brazilian girls. I think the Brazilian now is coming, like they're studying everything.
A curvaceous teenager named Gisele Bündchen started the Brazilian Blitz several seasons ago. She single-handedly got designers to lift the embargo on décolletage. And in doing so, she has since commandeered every runway and newsstand and never looked back.
International was in, but they still lacked the characteristics of the Big Six. They were not yet angels. That was soon to follow. Launched in 1995, the VS annual show was a global phenomenon. The show happened every year in locations including London, Paris, Shanghai, and LA, with legions of the world's biggest supermodels wearing incredible show-stopping, flesh-bearing lingerie in a $12 million runway spectacular. As a model at the glamorous end of the fashion spectrum, appearing in it as an angel was the pinnacle of your runway career, with an alumni of modeling legends including Gisele Bündchen, Naomi Campbell, Tyra Banks, Heidi Klum, and Miranda Kerr, all having appeared in the show. The show launched in 1995 and was at once a major pop culture event, drawing millions of viewers each year.
Recently, Times Square became a giant front row for the first ever Victoria's Secret runway presentation, broadcast live from New York's Plaza Hotel. The show featured many of the supermodels who have helped shape Victoria's Secret into one of the world's most successful catalogs for women and fantasy fodder for millions of men.
However, in 2019, the magic seemed to have left it. It had its lowest ratings ever and drew criticism that it was sexist, outdated, and lacked diversity. Victoria's Secret announced that it had cancelled its annual fashion show amid dwindling sales, the lowest ever television ratings, multiple scandals, and rising criticism of the company L brands as well as the event. Perhaps there is a particular look or rare level of beauty that sets one girl apart as a supermodel from the others, but when we study who was the official model of the year from 1994 to 2019, the industry itself's benchmark, we see that the ideal pinnacle of beauty changed each and every year. Unlike in elite sports, no one model has ever been able to dominate year after year. Perhaps the idea of beauty is as ephemeral as the zeitgeist. Just to show how fragile life at the top is, the Buddhists have a word for it, anicca. It means impermanence and how things always change.
More than anything, aside from the genetic beatitudes that have been bestowed upon them, they're also very hardworking people. They are extremely dedicated to their craft. They become part of a conversation. The ideology that they follow is not, okay, I'm going to show up on a shoot and be this and that. They want to be part of the creative process. And I think the reason they have the ability to last and be part of our conversation still 30 years later is because of that, because of this dedication and this ability to realize that they wanted control of how they were perceived. The art and commerce was very much a part of who they were. They became business people, much like Katharine Hepburn or Bette Davis or Marlon Brando did in film. It was a very unique time where they took a vested interest in their careers.
As Rod Tidwell famously said in the movie Jerry Maguire,
"Show me the money."
I can understand that people don't understand it necessarily, but I think that we definitely attribute to the sales of these clothes, and people are making billions of dollars off of us, and so a couple of $1,000s are satisfactory.
taking out personal preferences and subjectivity, the real common denominator for the attribution of the super moniker has to be the money. Because whether you were a male supermodel or female supermodel, the thing that sets you apart as super is the ability to command the massive million-dollar contracts.
I think that we never went around pointing revolvers at designers' heads saying, pay us this much. I think it's designers who decided to pay us this much, and it escalated to the point where it is now. It was never our fault, and to a certain point, yes, we are worth the money because I think that the image sells the clothes.
There are very few girls who can ask for this kind of money, and the girls who can ask, they get it.
Market forces, isn't it? It's supply and demand. You're a supermodel now. You can demand enormous fees, can't you?
Well, I don't know if we can demand even that much because it's like, he'll be here today and gone tomorrow. I mean, we can like say, yeah, we'll do it, book it, I'll be there.
According to fashion folklore, their highest recorded fees include Christy Turlington's $3 million contract with Calvin Klein and one signed by Claudia Schiffer, who at the peak of her reign was the face of Chanel for one full year, earning $15 million.
Guess and her Chanel campaign is the new girl in the world, it seems to be, because all the newspapers, everybody want to talk about, make interviews, make TVs with her, so there must be something. If not, the people wouldn't be around. I have nothing to do with that. It's all hers, huh?
You read about it that a model gets $20,000 to walk down a runway, or 15 or 10, whatever it is, and you think, Jesus, like, you know, what are they doing? They're just walking. I mean, why should anybody pay anybody for that? You can't always tell at a good collection what a model does. You can sure tell at a bad collection what a model does. You put a gunny sack of galoshes on Naomi and she comes walking down a runway and you understand why a model gets paid. I mean, the dress doesn't come with those hips.
There's just those standouts, you know, that you just kind of, you know, gravitate to. And I think, you know, I remember the first time, you know, working and seeing, you know, Iman, you know, and working with her early in our career. And you know, it's just like the first time, you know, Linda walks in the studio. You know, it's the first time Iman walks in. I remember the first time with Naomi, you know, and she was maybe 17 or 18. We shot her for the first time.
Let's take a closer look at the Big Six.
Want to stop up in Covent Garden. Covent Garden's fun. A lady came up to me called Beth and she gave me her card and she said, you know, you could model, and I was quite surprised that she came to me because I was with all my girlfriends who were really like beautiful, blonde hair and blue eyes and tall, but she came to me.
Recruited at the age of 15 by the late 1980s, Campbell with Christy Turlington and Linda Evangelista formed a trio known as the Trinity, who became the most recognizable and in-demand models of their generation.
For me, Naomi Campbell is just one of the most extraordinary. She's like a Black Panther. She has this sinewy, fabulous body. Her face is just like a goddess. Her and the camera just have this symbiotic relationship that is second to none. And watching her work, I had the great opportunity of seeing her shoot a French Vogue cover and main fashion with Patrick de Marchelier, a very well-known photographer. And just seeing her, she had a string of pearls, I remember, around her neck, and she was wearing Chanel, and just flicking these pearls around. I was just enthralled to watch her. And you can see then what makes her a supermodel.
Naomi is absolutely brilliant, creative, innovative, cheeky, funny, an amazing mover. She's brilliant. She's a natural-born superstar, no question.
Naomi Campbell is an anomaly. She's not somebody who's come along in life. You know, I was, you know, my expression about her, and she, you know, this is written all over anything that anyone wants to say about me and Naomi, is I call her my Buffalo Soldier. She was fighting on arrival, fighting for survival. She's that girl. And I think that she basically is so unique in who she is, you know, so she's just destined. There are people who just come to the earth that's just meant to do.
I didn't imagine or have a fantasy to be a star. I had a fantasy to be a great dancer, which I didn't end up being, but never know.
The walk of Naomi Campbell, again, second to none. She has this ability to make everything move from the hips down, and it's just basically sex on legs. I think that's the way I would describe her.
Naomi will be modeling or will go down the runway when she's 75 years old. Mark my words. You heard it first. Here.
It's not that I didn't want to be a model. I mean, it's not like I didn't want to be a model, it's just I never thought about being a model. I thought about being the first woman president or a doctor or, like...
After finishing high school, Crawford moved to New York City from Chicago, and in 1986, she signed with Elite.
Cindy Crawford was Miss America, Miss USA. She was very glamorous, and I think it was always a challenge to make her editorial. She never wanted to get rid of her mole, which I think obviously now, in hindsight, was one of the best moves she could have made. But I think the challenge with her, Stephen Meisel, another very famous photographer, one of my personal favourite at the time, always felt he struggled to make her very editorial, and yet she was. She was extraordinarily bright as well. So she was your sort of serious Miss USA. She was very professional, very on point at all times. Also one of the loveliest girls around.
As when you first start modeling, you set certain goals, like you want to do a Cosmo cover, you want to do a Vogue cover, you want a cosmetic contract. And so far those goals I've achieved, but I think what I'm working on now is taking the momentum that I've built in modeling and using that to go other places. So, straight modeling, I've sort of done that. I have a show and I do interviews. Interviewing, yeah, that's fun.
She was featured on countless glossy magazine covers. A partial count in 1998 totaled over 500.
I think with Cindy was just, she was just, absolutely drop dead gorgeous. It was like, whoa, okay. I had to recalibrate just to sort of engage. But she was incredibly professional, always professional, very well put together, really knew where she wanted to go. Talk about manifestation. There, I think you have a master, if you're allowed to say master manifester right there.
Her daughter, Kaya Gerber, is one of today's most sought-after models.
I think she is truly a real model. And she looks real and she is real. Besides, she's Cindy's daughter. Just everything about her is what a real model should look like.
Can you get a shot at it there? Laura, there you are. Gary, get your hands off that magazine. There you are. There she is on Cosmo. She is one of the most in-demand models of the world. A little something for yourself. Please welcome Christy Turlington.
It's a funny thing too. Fashion is quite a ridiculous thing in the realm of the whole, the whole picture. But I don't know. People take it very seriously, which I find amusing.
In 2008, casting agent James Scully said Turlington was the greatest model of all time. He added, "You could combine every model to this day into one person, and they wouldn't come close. Sorry, girls."
She's incredibly nice, professional, and she's intelligent and all of that, but really it's because she's so incredibly ravishing.
Chrissy, just, the ultimate professional, smart, really wanted to educate herself, went back to school. Just an incredible, beautiful Audrey Hepburn, brilliant. Everyone loves Christy. They used to say I was the male Christy, which was a huge compliment.
To describe Christy is perfection. That's the only word. I remember that some magazine did it where they cut her face in half and put two sides together and it was still perfect. That's what she is, perfection. She is also one of the nicest people on the planet, the most professional. But you really, meeting her many a time, but I used to just sort of stare at her face sort of vacantly, because she really is one of the most beautiful women on the planet. And that's the only word I could, the most beautiful.
She's magical. She's definitely a magical person.
Born in Croydon, South London, Kate was discovered at 14 years old while walking through an airport.
My dad worked for Pan Am, and we were on standby for like 3 days. We'd slept in the airport. Eventually we got on the plane. It was the same plane as my agent. Her brother came up and asked me if I'd ever thought about modelling, and I was 14, so obviously I hadn't thought about anything.
Arriving at the end of the supermodel era, Moss rose to fame in the mid-1990s as part of the heroin chic fashion trend. Her collaborations with Calvin Klein brought her to fashion icon status.
Kate Moss came along. She's one of my favourite girls. She's absolutely beautiful, but she came along at a time when we had these sort of, coming out of the 80s, Uber models. They were very athletic looking. You had girls like Ashley Richardson who would leap across the page. You know, it was all that real athleticism. And so Kate came along at a time when all we were seeing were these big, strong girls. And then you saw this girl that was very slim, that was really unusual, but had the most angelic face.
Her 5'8" wayfish frame was a contrast to the Amazonian body shapes of the other 5 supermodels.
Yeah, I shot for Harper's Bazaar with Kate Moss in New York City. I think he wasn't super famous yet, but we were all over the subway in New York City, and I remember wearing these weird glasses, and Kate was kind of a little bit shy and quiet, you know, but we were just running around New York City in the subway and whatnot, and the photographer was just clicking away, and pictures came out nice.
Regarding Kate Moss, I actually never worked with her, unfortunately. I really wanted to, and I think she is, well, probably and accurately one of the greatest, most iconic models of all time. And she is extraordinary as an actress, as a model, as a personality, as a character. I think she represented that whole, when she came onto the scenes in mid-90s, that whole grunge Korean Day episode of fashion, which was sort of girl next door, but girl with great attitude and wasn't afraid to swear, to smoke, to be a bit of a lads, because there's a whole lads culture going on at that point. I never had the pleasure of working with her. I did actually meet her once at Claridge's and was introduced to her by a lovely hairdresser called Ray Allington, who sadly is no longer with us now. And he introduced me with such gusto and enthusiasm, and she kind of took one look at me and then just took a drag on a cigarette and ignored me completely. So it wasn't meant to be, Kate and I. But she is, you know, phenomenal in what she's done, and the influence and the power, and you can't not love Kate Moss.
Well, I'm famously known as turning Kate Moss down. She was working with a photographer called Corinne Day, who was originally a model with us. And Corinne shot her in some photographs on a beach with an Indian headdress on, topless. And she was 5'7" at a push, Kate. And it was the time of the Uber model. Everyone was 5'9" and athletic and aggressive looking. And then Corinne came in with this girl who was 5'7" and all sort of skinny and demure and unusually wearing an Indian headdress in the ocean. And I was like, I understand, but I don't really. And I showed Carol, who owned Elite London, and I said, what do you think? And she said, no, it could be too difficult to push. I think it's a no. There you go.
I've had a long career. I think it has to do with the people I work with. I'm professional, I'm on time, and I change for them. But I change for me, and maybe that's got a lot to do with my staying power. I guess.
The Canadian-born model was discovered by Elite Modeling Agency when she was just 16 years old. Her career took off when it was suggested by French hairstylist Julien Dice that she cut her tresses into a short gamine cut. The hairstyle eventually became known as the Linda.
Linda Evangelista, the great Linda Evangelista, amazing soul, always willing to help. I mean, like I said, the first time I met her was in Milan, and she helped me kick my nerves out the door and you know, helped me to embark on being such a good runway model. Just amazing soul, just, you know.
Linda Evangelista, my personal favorite, was always the supermodel. She was the epitome of the best model in the world. She was changing her looks every 5 minutes and rocking them and really starting movements every time she cut her hair or she wore something, and she was just the iconic fashion model's favorite model. She really was. Every girl you'd ever speak to would say, I would want to be like Linda Evangelista.
It was amazing having them walk into the studio in the morning. You know, like Linda would walk in, and I mean, Charles and I are very into narratives, and we're kind of known as storytellers with a lot of the campaigns that we work on, and Linda just loved that. I mean, she walked in and you said, okay, today you are, this is who you are, this is what, you know, this is what you need to emote during the photos. She just absolutely loved that.
I'm not the same with each photographer. When I go to work with a particular photographer, I bring the person he wants me to be. I don't just bring me, myself. There would be no need to work with different photographers. I could just work with one if I was just going to bring myself.
Linda is just awesome too, almost like a tomboy. She and I were like best mates. Great sense of humor, Canadian accordion player. Probably the best model I ever saw as far as working and as far as creating characters and images and stillness, like you know, like a superstar, like a silent movie queen, like Sophia Loren as a young woman, you know, just amazingly expressive.
I've done fashion shows with Linda before, and we did a trip to Greece also for a fashion show, and I think that might have been after the Kenner shoot though, but that Kenner shoot, I mean, it was quite, Linda was, you know, a little bit late for work as usual, I think, but once she was ready to go, things went smooth, you know. The little monkey Jessie was in a great mood and ready to rock and pose, and so it was fun, exciting shoot, and also to work with Linda. I think it must have been one of the first time I worked with Linda. So, and just, you know, I mean, I had done shows with her before, but to be just the two of us and little Jessie, the monkey, it was exciting, and you know, she was such a big star.
In 1991, it was rumored that the fashion house Lanvin paid Evangelista $20,000 to walk in their haute couture show for the spring-summer season, an amount that was considered excessive.
I'm difficult, okay?
I know you are.
She could be a little tricky, but you know, as the agent, you're very much in the inner circle, so you were dealing with and talking to these girls every day. So they were pretty much very professional, and they'd have to work so hard. They were never on the ground for more than, 24 hours, and they were on another flight somewhere else where they'd have to turn up looking and being fabulous. And it was very demanding. They'd work pretty much 7 days a week. They were so in demand, we were even trying to find night shoots to put them in if they could deal with it.
There's a sort of tabloid element to the coverage, isn't there? That they're quoting friends, unacknowledged friends, saying, well, that quote about the clock ticking and so on. I mean...
Of course it's ticking, and of course once you're on the top, where are you going to go? There's nowhere to go after you're at the top. I'm not stupid, and I'm not worried. I've done everything I wanted to do. I've gotten everything I wanted to get, and I'm not bitter. I had a really good time, and I'm still going.
I'm coming from Germany, and we didn't really think about that, too much. In America, for example, every little girl has a dream about being a model. In Germany, we don't think about that. Nobody collects pictures of any kind of model. So I was never thinking about it.
Claudia Schiffer, Claudia. I remember meeting Claudia for the first time in a job in Normandy, in Deauville, and I was shooting a campaign and an editorial. And the editorial was with Peter Lindbergh, the campaign was with Pamela Hansen. And it was at the beginning of her career, and she was just this, I almost imagined her in lederhosen coming down from the mountains in Bavaria, because she was so sort of joyous and gorgeous and beautiful and, and fresh and just excited and, just so she was a breath of fresh air, and she was just divine. And I had no notion there that she would have and create this career that she had, which, to this day is, unsurpassed, really. It's an incredible career she's had.
Claudia, for me, was, again, she came to fame with she did the Guest campaign, I think, was what really pivoted her into the big time.
I don't think it hit her yet until she started to see the pictures in all the magazines in Europe, in America, and then people started to recognize her and see her.
I remember I was in New York, and it was on the weekend, and I didn't have any makeup on whatsoever. I was just wearing a pair of jeans, like nothing special, and I was going in the elevator into a building to see a friend, and somebody said to me, aren't you Claudia Schiffer, the Guest jeans girl? And I thought I was going to die.
She was a business. She was like Cindy Crawford. She was a businesswoman. She knew where she was going. She knew her value, and she had good people around her who exploited that beautifully for her.
Claudia I met quite a few times through her Paris agent when I was living there. And Claudia was one of those girls that without makeup, you really didn't see what she could be. Once they put makeup on her, she came alive. She was also one of the sexiest women that you've ever seen once they put makeup on. Without makeup, she was just her face just took makeup. I can't describe how different it made her. And she could do any look as well, depending on the makeup they put on her. So she was this beautiful canvas that people could really bring out. And of course, she had that great relationship with the camera, knew how to move, knew what the camera needed from her. And so she sort of became the sexy supermodel.
It's a healthy beauty. It's the way her skin radiates when you see her.
She's not too exotic. She's not too beautiful. She's right in the middle.
She radiates such great energy, above and beyond the normal model.
The German model has appeared on over 1,000 magazine covers, according to Glamour. At age 17, she was spotted in a nightclub in Dusseldorf. Claudia eventually moved to New York, where she signed with Elite.
Tell us if we ever really see the real Claudia in the pictures. Are you there?
I'm always there. But who's really me? I don't know. It's always me.
The dawning of this era of supermodels was, of course, the most famous Naomi, Cindy, Christy, Linda, but there was Cordula Reiser. There was, think of all the other names. There were actually quite a few at that point. Of course, there was Carla Bruni Tedeschi, and there was Karen Mulder. And then later there were other supermodels, Shalom Harlow and Amber, but it began with this, and Tatiana Petitz, of course, incredible faces. And there was a drama that we all brought to the industry at that point, and we all became like able actors. You know, we played the silent role of becoming actors in our own play and being able to participate and collaborate with photographers, where I believe that prior to that, a lot of the women just kind of took orders and did what they did. And it was a very generic feminine representation of what the male wanted to see. And there was a different invitation in the 90s to be defiant, to be emotional, to be dramatic, to be fierce, to be on a Harley Davidson motorcycle, to be a rock star, and to like really, those of us that could scream and do all these crazy things were the ones that became sort of the supermodels of that era.
Some supermodels like Tyra Banks and Heidi Klum use reality TV to cement their mark on pop culture. And later, as reality television and social media became true cultural forces, we saw the rise of Kendall Jenner and the Hadid sisters. Today, the biggest defining factor for a supermodel is not the amount of magazine covers they grace or their IMDb page. It's their social media following. The models who have these massive followings are the supermodels of today. If Kendall Jenner decides to post an image from a campaign, suddenly 100 million people are going to see that picture. You can see how models like that can command much bigger salaries.
It's not part of my contract that I need to have social media, but they definitely appreciate every client that I work with. They definitely like look at you and they're like, okay, she has a lot of followers, so we want to do the campaign with her. So it helps you get jobs.
I actually now see it almost as a form of medium for work. Fun as it is, I also try and put some time in when I'm on my downtime for work and engage in it in that way.
Sometimes it feels like a burden. Sometimes you feel the obligation that you have to post consistently, even when you're living your life. You have a million things day to day that are going on. It's almost like homework sometimes, it feels like.
My thoughts on the supermodel back in the day and the original supermodels and the supermodels of today, it's so different. Obviously social media has made a huge difference. My feeling was the supermodels back in the 90s, it was this phenomena. We didn't have the social media accounts and followings. And therefore it was slower for these girls to get out there and become famous. And when they did, it was like a supernova. It was everything collided, fashion, music, the model industry, all collided to create this wonderful phenomenon. The supermodels of today, it's a different kind of phenomena. For me, Kendall Jenner is the phenomena of the Kardashians, and maybe a combination of reality TV meets the model industry rather than fashion. I think then fashion comes in afterwards. At the end of the day, we're all trying to sell product, and it was whatever sold product that then became the phenomena.
Hello everyone, it's Dixie and Charlie. Welcome to whoever's YouTube channel this clip makes it into. We have no idea, but we are both here and ready for YouTube.
Today, the supermodel archetype has shifted yet again. No longer just defined by magazine covers and big brand campaigns. Today's supermodel walks the runway, bumps elbows with the elite, and also runs an entrepreneurial empire, all while documenting her life on social media to an audience of millions.
This is a story about a time I almost accidentally walked out on an Alexander McQueen runway naked.
Lately, although the transition has been slow, prerequisites for her weight, colour and gender identity and her attitude are starting to crack wide open. A whole new era beckons. She has evolved and is evolving into an altogether new era of iconography. And although her role and her title may change, her impact is unlikely to waver. But what about the male gender, you ask? The male supermodels. With the backing of blue-chip clients, key photographers, and legions of admirers and followers on Instagram, today's top-tier male models are at the forefront of fashion. era of the male supermodel well and truly arrived in the 1990s, just like the girls. And the movers and shakers of the moment are proving themselves every bit as essential as their female counterparts.
We have taken you around the world to meet the most beautiful models, but now women are asking, one of them next to me, where are the great-looking guys?
From the daily call sheets of photographers like Steven Meisel, Mario Testino, Nick Knight, Merton Marcus, Bruce Weber, and Stephen Klein, to ads for mega brands like Prada, Burberry, Calvin Klein, and Versace, male models are making their presence felt. Finding the perfect balance between edgy editorials and coveted contracts is what makes stars. But holding the interest of major brands over a length of time solidifies careers. In a competitive market, flooded with hundreds, the guys who matter are the ones who bring something extra to the table. So now, having framed the conversation around what it means to be a supermodel, we explore the changes and movements that paved the way for the male supermodel, the revolutions of the remarkable decade that was the 1990s, the music, television, technology, and how one photographer in particular almost single-handedly changed our concept of the ideal of masculinity. In 1990s, rise of the male supermodel.